Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you may be. My name is Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Friday, May the 20th, 2022. I'm going to start today with some breaking news, some good news. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Nancy Pelosi banned from Holy Communion. And we have some tweets from Salvatore Di Corleone, who is the Archbishop of San Francisco. And he writes, after numerous attempts to speak with Speaker Pelosi to help her understand the grave evil she is perpetrating, the scandal she is causing, and the danger to her own soul she is risking, I have determined that she is not to be admitted to Holy Communion. Yes. How about that? Oh, and yes, there's a link to a letter at the website of the Archdiocese of San Francisco, but it has been subject to a DDoS attack and is down. Yes. Oh, I see someone tweets, I am pro-choice Catholic father. I might be denied communion with my God as well. Yes, well, if you're engaged in the perpetration of evil, then that seems wholly appropriate. According to a story, the Archdiocese, the Archbishop, attempted 7 or 8 times to speak to Speaker Pelosi, and her office said that she was busy, essentially, too busy to speak. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that there are hundreds or thousands of churches in the United States which would be just ever so pleased to give Nancy Pelosi communion. But this has to count as an embarrassment. More than that, I mean, this rebuke might actually cause her to consider the peril, the imperilment of her immortal soul. I'm not counting on it, but stranger things have happened. So the Archbishop wrote, quoting the Code of Canon Law, by means of this communication, I am hereby notifying you that you are not to present yourself for Holy Communion, and should you do so, you are not to be admitted to Holy Communion until such time as you publicly repudiate your advocacy for the legitimacy of abortion and confess and receive absolution of this grave sin in the sacrament of penance. Perhaps in anticipation of this, the Associated Press decided to let the world know that Christians and abortion, what is that a thing? Yes, that's what they did. Religious backers of abortion rights say God's on their side. This is from Claire Galaforo. It was lunch hour at the abortion clinic. Yes, a very sort of cozy way to begin this story. It was lunchtime at the abortion clinic, so the nurse in the recovery room got her Bible out of her bag in the closet and began to read, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding," her favorite proverb says. As she returns to it again and again, he will make your paths straight. Lean not on your own understanding. Yes, I think that this woman, Ramona, she's called, doesn't quite understand the proverb. She believes God led her here to a job at the West Alabama Women's Center, tending to people who've just had abortions. I trust in God, she said. Out in the parking lot, protesters bellowed at patients arriving for appointments, doing battle against what they regard as a grave sin. The loudest voices in the abortion debate are often characterized along a starkly religious divide, the faithful versus not. But the reality is much more nuanced. Of course it is. Both at this abortion clinic and in the nation that surrounds it. The clinic staff of 11, most of them Black, deeply faithful Christian women, have no trouble at all reconciling their work with their religion. What exactly is their work? Dismembering babies. Perhaps Ramona was reading from that translation of the Bible wherein King Herod is not the villain. He is, in fact, a hero because, remember the slaughter of the innocents? Yes, he took care of an awful lot of babies. And as the U.S. Supreme Court appears poised to dismantle the constitutional right to an abortion, they draw on their faith that they will somehow continue. God is on our side, they tell each other. God will keep this clinic open. Robin Marty, who moved from Minneapolis to Tuscaloosa a couple of years ago to help run this clinic, was surprised to hear nurses pray for guidance as the future of abortion grows uncertain. That is one of the things that has caused a whiplash for me. I had this stereotype in my head of a Southern religious person. She said, I just assumed that there was no compatibility between people who are religious and people who support the ability to get an abortion. Marty realized she was wrong. It's a common error. We need to have a real conversation about what we describe as Christianity, said Kendra Cotton, a member of the Black Southern Women's Collective, a network of Black women organizers, many of them from faith-based groups. The white evangelical worldview, boo! Oh, so it's only evangelicals who are against abortions. Presumably Catholics and Orthodox are not against abortion as well. Their worldview that abortion is murder has consumed, yes, I could point out that it was a very famous German Lutheran pastor who was murdered by the Nazis who coined the phrase abortion is murder. And Lutherans are not evangelicals. So this has flattened the understanding of how religion and views on abortion truly intersect, according to Cotton. Before Roe v. Wade, faith leaders in many places led efforts to help pregnant women access underground abortions. Faith leaders, because they considered it a calling to show compassion and mercy to the most vulnerable. To the most vulnerable. Who is the most vulnerable in this situation? The child in the womb or the woman who wants to kill it? Now, Black Protestants have some of the most liberal views on access to abortion. Nearly 70% believe abortion should be legal in most or all cases. White evangelicals are the other extreme, with only 24% believing abortion should be allowed in most or all cases. You see, this is essentially a racial division, according to the Associated Press. We know that Christianity supports freedom, and inherent in freedom is bodily autonomy. Inherent in Christianity is free will. When people talk about the body being a temple of God, you have purview over your body. There is nothing more sacred. Yes, a temple of God, I suppose in the case of this abortion clinic, rather like an Aztec temple. The idea of the state restricting what a person can do with their own body is in direct conflict with that, she said, and is reminiscent of being under someone else's control of, wait for it, slavery. Absolutely shameless. Absolutely shameless. And let's have a look at the chat. Hello to Anran, Chokin 666. Use soap. Ugh. Buddy says, Kevin, just so you know, I'm here live in sunny, hot Midwest USA. Excited to broadcast from a visitor's position. Hello to Mercurius Alicus. Greetings from the future, 9 a.m. Saturday here in Queensland, Australia. Yo Mama says, finally. Buddy reports we've dropped 3 games straight. Respectable commenting name says, does the church actually prohibit communion for those who live in sin anymore? It's supposed to. But there's a sort of don't ask, don't tell policy at most Catholic churches, even so far as Catholics are obligated to go to confession at least once a year, and otherwise that's a sin, a very grievous sin. But there are many Catholics who take communion who haven't been to confession for years. He continues, I thought that was reserved for people of mildly conservative political opinions. No chrism for you, says Chogokin 666. Yo Mama says, Biden's next. Hello to Palcasso 88. Oscar Toe says, evangelicals owned. True Greenbeard says, Somewhere someone is saying something like, well, that wasn't very Christian of the Archbishop. Isn't Christianity about forgiveness? Remember the girl with the sign that said, I wish I was aborted, says Oscar Toe. In Europe, evangelical means Lutheran. Yeah, it's a different meaning in the United States. Considerably different meaning. Okay, who else do we have here? And so the soul is physical, asks Oscar Toe. Temple to Moloch, says Mercurius Olycus. So someone else who has religious views is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is absolutely bizarre that, I don't know, was she on something? This is from James Gordon at the Daily Mail. AOC flaunts her engagement ring on bizarre Instagram Live while stumbling through a Bible parable about a woman cheating on her husband before blasting the so-called radicalized Supreme Court. AOC broadcast for more than an hour on Thursday night to about 4,500 followers on Instagram. Ocasio then made comparisons with a parable of Jesus from the Bible. She made comparisons between powerful people such as the Pharisees in the Bible with those in positions of power today, taking away autonomy from women. Okay. During her more than hour-long broadcast, the 32-year-old squad member didn't mince words. Quote, "It is so awful that we are in this moment. I really think that one of the most effective things we can do is to help people whose rights are being attacked right now. The Supreme Court has long been radicalized, and you have basically several people who have lied, and it certainly feels like they absolutely misled people in their statements in order to get on the Supreme Court. Several justices were appointed by a man who facilitated in an insurrection against the United States government." I don't think AOC knows what facilitated means, or facilitate. And that is clearly being reflected in the decisions coming out of this court. I figured one of the best ways to help people is directly assist people who need abortions in places where they can't get them. If you are in any place that is outlawing abortion, trying to prevent you from accessing it, Texas, Oklahoma, you are welcome in New York, and we will do what we can. It never stops shocking me the amount of ignorance that goes into this, unquote. Yes, come up to New York. Again, you can get your abortion, and maybe you can take in a Broadway show. During a meandering stream of consciousness ramble, the prominent progressive Democrat then went on to discuss a parable in an attempt to compare a story from the Bible to that of modern times and the issues facing women. As someone who grew up in a Christian household, I've been thinking a lot about a parable of Christ. And if you would indulge me, for those who may not be Christian and familiar with the story, it's a story that is relevant in general. The parable is of a woman. A lot of people may have heard the phrase, "Let he who is without sin throw the first stone." In that story, there is a woman who was not allowed to be granted a divorce from her husband. And so for all intents in purposes, they were not really together. They were also the Pharisees, strong religious and political leaders. Many of them were in a physical relationship with this woman AOC started before heading off on a tangent. At one point, one of the Pharisees is caught with the woman, and she is immediately marched out into the town square where she is able to get dressed. Everyone surrounds her and try to figure out if they should punish her. Let's be really clear about the power dynamic here. When you have several powerful people doing this, it frankly really blurs the lines of consent, because what choice would she have had when they hold so much power? Yes, so if we want to take this parable, whatever it was, I'm not getting anything from this, but the parable here is apparently that evil, strong men force women not to use contraception. That would seem to be the interest. Oh, she continues. Christ takes an interest and call him over for advice. He draws something in the sand, and people come out to see. Let he who is without sin throw the first stone. I think there's a deeper meaning to that story. Ocasio-Cortez says she entered an analytical phrase. Okay, not phase, but phrase. I believe in the separation of church and state. Oh, no, wait. Christ does not condemn her. The people who did something wrong there were those who were abusing her power. There are a lot of those kinds of types of people around today trying to abuse women and take their autonomy away, all in the name of a book that they really haven't studied that closely. I don't think that AOC has given 5 minutes thought to the Bible or to Christianity. Oh, I don't know, in the last 15, 20 years. But no, let's talk about abortion, and suddenly I'm a Christian again. It's funny how that works, isn't it? Let's talk about teachers. Are they our greatest enemy? This is from Jessica Chasmar at Fox News. At least 135 teachers and teachers' aides have been arrested so far this year on child sex-related crimes in the U.S., ranging from child pornography to raping students. An analysis conducted by Fox News Digital looked at local news stories week by week featuring arrests of teachers and teachers' aides on child sex-related crimes in school districts across the country. Arrests that weren't publicized were not counted in the analysis, meaning the true number may well be higher. The analysis found that at least 135 teachers and teachers' aides have been arrested in 41 states between January 1st and May the 13th, which works out to about an arrest a day on average. The vast majority of the arrested educators were men, 105 to 30. And let's see, many of the arrests involved especially heinous allegations. I don't really want to give the details here because they're so disgusting and hardly believable in some cases. Anthony James Phillips, a 61 former teacher at Cupertino Middle School in Sunnyvale, was arrested on April 1st. He was also accused of raping a student in 2009 when he was still a teacher at Cupertino. Anessa Page Gower, a 35-year-old former biology teacher at Making Waves Academy in Richmond, California, was charged with 29 counts of child molestation April the 8th. I'm not going to repeat the charges, but I was curious. This name, Anessa, an alarm went off in my head. Anessa. That's a made-up name. And I have noticed that troons almost always have made-up names. And so I went looking for a picture of this Anessa Page Gower, and looks like a man. Very much looks like a man. I've been saying for quite some time that if there were serious concern about the molestation of children by teachers in the United States, if it was actively investigated, the results would absolutely dwarf what was discovered about the Catholic Church. Absolutely dwarf it. And of course, there's a problem in both cases, which is that because so many of these assaults are made on boys, that so many of them are not reported because it is so shameful. And in fact, there's a kind of sexual impression made on these boys. So they come to believe that they are gay, and they're conflicted because they were initiated into this in a foul way, but it has become their identity, or they've been told that it's their identity. The late Joseph Nicolosi, a psychologist, told me that in his practice, about 40% of homosexuals that he worked with had said that they were initiated into homosexuality while underage or even children by adult males. Now, another thing that's changed in recent years, of course, is that bizarre types of paraphilia are now being paraded out in the open. And, of course, teachers should be speaking to 5-year-olds about their sexuality. Now, there's a word for this, and it's called grooming. Now, there can be many results of grooming, but one of which is that teachers, take the opportunity. Oh, well, you are not who you really think you are, and guess who can help you with this? Well, the teacher can, right? We have gay-straight alliances in schools. I know in some places, like the province of Alberta, it's mandatory for all schools, public or private, to have gay-straight alliances. These are grooming parlors for homosexuality and for troons. And they often bring in adults, besides the teacher, to talk about how great it is to be an alphabet person. Here's a story from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. A school board director in Washington state plans to host a queer youth open mic night at a sex shop she owns and has invited all children aged 0 to 18 years old to attend. Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Mason, a member of the Bellingham Public Schools Board of Directors, will hold the June 1st event at her Wink Wink boutique in Bellingham. Come share and hold space with a celebration and stage for young queer voters in our community, states a Facebook page advertising the event, encouraging all children aged 0 to 18 years old to attend. Mason's Wink Wink sex shop asserts, we believe that normalizing, accepting, and affirming all bodies, identities, and gender experiences is an inherently political act. Pleasure is our revolution. Mason also offers sex coaching, and I won't finish the end of that sentence. The sex shop owner claimed that the event for children would be separated from the area containing the sex toys, although Seattle radio host Jason Rantz wasn't convinced. The sex shop isn't living up to its promise to be inclusive, never creepy. This event is inappropriately inclusive and extremely creepy, he said. The school district tried to separate itself from the event, telling Fox News that the community event is not sponsored by our schools, our school district. It's not possible to sic the police on this woman. The event is likely to increase concerns held by parents that members of the alphabet people community are hiding behind it in order to groom children into adopting a gay or trans identity. As we highlighted last month, White House spokesperson Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, declared that kindergarten-age children should be discussing whether they are a boy or a girl with teachers. 1 in 5 Gen Z adults now identify as alphabet people, while the number of total Americans doing the same has doubled in a decade, according to a February Gallup poll. Obviously, there isn't a huge increase in young people being born gay, but many have been socially re-educated via culture and the schooling system to adopt alphabet people identities, a path that normally leads to isolation, manic depression, and in some cases suicide, before we even consider the moral aspects. A 2021 study found that lesbian, gay, and bisexual people were more than twice as likely as heterosexuals to have a long-term mental health condition. Now, the controversy about libs of TikTok, what was it? Why did this become such a huge controversy? There's a Twitter account, which basically just someone said this on TikTok or whatever. Why is this such a huge controversy? Because the teachers of America are so emboldened in their demonic perversity that they speak aloud. They publish it on the internet. A fourth grade teacher saying, oh, all of my students the next year, so many of them say that they're alphabet people. Yeah, she's a lesbian. And grooming is an appropriate word. And I'm just going to run down some of the most recent examples. This is from Sawyer PK8, which is in Bolton, Massachusetts. They think it says drag is the theatrical performance of someone who expresses their genders in different ways. It includes makeup, costumes, dancing, and performances. Masculine performers are called drag kings, and feminine performers are called drag queens. This is posted on a window in elementary school. Yes, here we have a teacher who assures us that she is a cishet. But despite that, the pride flag is the most important part of my classroom. The most important part. And we learned about cake gender people. That's a thing now. They don't think that they're literally cake people who think that they're like cake, soft and fluffy, or maybe they have different layers, or I'm not making this up. This licensed therapist is really happy that she was able to help a young girl get top surgery because of a TikTok video. Keep your kids off TikTok. Yeah. Governor Mills and the Maine Department of Education announced they are removing this lesson plan from the DOE website because it's inappropriate for kindergartners. The Maine Department of Education has resources for teachers on their website. This resource is for kindergartners, and it discusses the alphabet people acronym. For trans, the teacher explains that doctors decide a baby's gender and are sometimes wrong. A parent at a school district called Olentangy, which is at Lewis Center, Idaho, shares her 8-year-old daughter's experience going to the bathroom in school and finding a boy there. The boy was allowed to be in the girls' bathroom because school policy says students can use whatever facility they feel matches their gender identity. Oh, and guys, you did not see a video of a mom's mic being cut off at a school board meeting. This was all a figment of your imagination. The fact checkers said so. Oh, yes, her mic then gets cut off because it's inappropriate for a public discussion. Yes. Oh, no, stop saying these disgusting things. These are disgusting things you're saying to elementary children, maybe in kindergartners even, but don't say them at a school board meeting. Libs of TikTok reported, my DMs are now flooded with Olentangy SD parents. This district sounds extremely problematic. I've never seen anything like this before. A top trans medical association sourced and appears to have collaborated with the members of a fetish site that secretly hosts extreme child sexual abuse fantasies in order to draft their guidelines for gender-affirming care. I have the story here. I'm not going to read from it because aside from the fact that it is well sourced, but it is barely believable and so enraging. Oh, I don't know, that it might, encourage something in Minecraft. And yes, the reason I bring up Libs of TikTok is this is just, as they say, scraping the surface. This is, you have got one woman collecting this stuff. And of course, there are many people who keep this secret. The fact that so many people are willing to go public with this, so many schools, so many school districts are willing to go public with this, convinces me, or persuades me rather, that the American school system is depraved. Now, it was John Dewey, who I suppose is the godfather of modern public education, who's responsible for all this. Because to Dewey, one of the most important reasons for public schools to exist, perhaps ultimately the most, is to inculcate citizenship in children. It's not the job of the parents, it's the job of public schools. And you could say, oh, well, John Dewey wouldn't have been in favor of this. Well, a modern day John Dewey would be in favor of it. So let's talk about the Great Replacement, which is now routinely, a memo went out on this, routinely described as an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. It's not really an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. It is not necessary that people pushing the idea of the Great Replacement, or the reality of it, actually, are Jewish. It's really not necessary, but this was disturbing to read. Let's have a quotation here. An overwhelming percentage of Orthodox Jews in the United States plan to cast their ballots for President Donald Trump come November 2020, according to a poll published Wednesday. The survey from the community's AMI magazine found that a whopping 83% of Orthodox Jews said they will vote for Trump, compared to just 13% who said they would support Joe Biden. That's pretty strong endorsement. Wesley Yang responded to this. The author of 1 Billion Americans, that would be nitwit Matthew Iglesias is a Jew, it's true, but there is no unitary Jewish interest. The Orthodox of New York City, at once the most ethnically particularist and cosmopolitan of all Jews, supported Trump by massive numbers. Someone called Joe McReynolds, who is self-described as a national security expert, responded this way: a supermajority of us Jews understand what it means to be treated as the other, and know that a white-dominated America is one in which we cannot truly be safe or free, that we need a diverse and pluralistic America. The ultra-Orthodox are off doing their own thing. Well, as I pointed out before, this is an original thought. Jews have flourished in America to a greater extent than they have any other place on earth, and this has been under Christian protection. But there are people like Joe McReynolds and Michelle Goldman of the New York Times, and Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Rubin of the Washington Post, who rail against white people and especially Christian rights. Some people don't know when they have it good, you know? McReynolds says, as I understand it from half-remembering posts of yours, you and I have different ideas of the role that white racism plays in America. You consider it one real problem among many, basically, whereas I consider it the fundamental root of many of the ills of our society. And again, there's this fantasy from people like Joe McReynolds and from Jen Rubin and Michelle Goldberg that when the revolution comes, they're not going to be hauled off to the gulag because we're not, but we're not white. Perhaps they should ask, the BIPOCs whether they consider them to be white. In any event, this is simply not. It's not in their interest in all sorts of ways. Oh, let's not talk about white privilege. I'm not part of white privilege. Oh, you're not? Well, why not? Because I'm not white. Oh, why don't we just consider the question of Jewish privilege then? No, let's not get into that. Let's not get into that. I mean, this is like suicidal. This is almost suicidal. Our friend David Pinson commented, Hasidic Jews in New York know something about being physically attacked, and yet they don't share their views. Why do you think that is? Oh, teen charged after group attacks Hasidic man on the streets of Brooklyn. Yes, teens. Always the teens who are responsible for these outrages. I've come to the conclusion that the left simply hates women. And I suppose there's a lot of self-hating women in the left. Let's look at TERFs. Oh, yeah, they're the worst people on earth. So you're in favor of bullying lesbians into having sexual relations with reconstructed men? Yes, they are. They are in favor of that. And anyone who speaks out against it must be seen to. The controversy about formula, baby formula, which is in short supply in the United States. Do I have to declare a personal interest in this? I have 3 children. All of them were bottle fed. I hold no strong opinions on this issue. But Vox.com does. Breastfeeding isn't free, and it isn't a solution to the nation's baby formula shortage. The response to the shortage, which has shelves across the U.S. carrying nearly half their usual supply in recent weeks, overlooks the high costs of breastfeeding. Oh, the high costs of breastfeeding. There's no shortage of people on social media ready to blame parents themselves for this disastrous situation. Just so you know, your body already makes the perfect food for your baby, and it's free. Oh, yeah, but you see, that's not really a very nuanced response to this. Vox continues, first, breastfeeding isn't for everyone, and that's okay. Okay, all right. Yeah, I have no problem with that. But wait, some birthing parents simply don't want to breastfeed. Birthing parents. Urge to do something horrible in Minecraft intensifies. Number three, the cost of breastfeeding, $950 or more for the first year compared to $1,200 for a year of infant formula. It's hardly the savings some tout. And there's a cartoon here where there's a woman naked from the waist up, and her breasts are covered with piggy banks. But the persistent myth that breastfeeding is free overlooks real costs associated with breastfeeding. There are necessary supplies required by most lactating parents. Women, they're called. They're called women. Bottles, $25. Milk storage bags, $15. Nursing bras, $25. $150 for a breast pump. $12 for something I'm not going to mention. Okay, if you have more than one child, you can reuse these things, okay? And it's not at all uncommon for, oh, so you're going to have a baby. Are you going to breastfeed? Oh, you are. Well, I have a bunch of stuff that I can give you or let you use, right? Number four, breastfeeding bills can include nursing supplies, lactation support, breast pumps and bottles, costs that quickly add up. Data shows that mothers who breastfeed for 6 months or more experience longer and more severe income loss than mothers who formula feed. Oh, here we go. These women who breastfeed are committing a crime against the GDP. Number five, breastfeeding is also time intensive and comes with a mental and physical price. A year of breastfeeding adds up to roughly 1,800 hours. It's basically a full-time unpaid job considering 40-hour work weeks and 3 weeks of vacation, total 1,960 work hours per year. There are also costs to the parents' physical health. Oh, fungal infections, osteoporosis, cramping, carpal tunnel syndrome, and inadequate sleep, and emotional health. Significant loss of time, judgment from strangers, exhaustion. I thought every woman who read Vox was already exhausted. Loss of bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy. Number six, in a comic for Vox, Aubrey Hirsch breaks down the many, many costs of breastfeeding. Learn more. And Herman Cortez, who follows me on Twitter, says, what is this madness? Who should you labor for, a transnational corporation or your baby? And someone called Lala said benefits bond with baby, weight loss, improved mood from oxytocin, faster recovery from childbirth, decreased risk of breast cancer, decreased risk of illness and ear infection in baby, free and perfect food. Yeah, okay. Oh, and someone called Natasha Love said, yeah, got to get the government involved. This is all an argument for proper paid maternity leave rather than an argument against breastfeeding. All that time I spent breastfeeding was spent watching telly or on the computer. If I was bottle feeding, I'd have had to focus on the bottle instead. I have bottle fed babies. I have bottle fed babies, thousands of times. It didn't really take a lot of attention. And I don't know whether I ever did, but it would have been easy enough, to cradle the baby. Here's the bottle. Check to see that it's, not too hot or not too cold, right? And sit on the couch and watch TV. What is this woman on about? Apparently, this is some sort of expertise is required to bottle feed babies. It's all so tiresome. Let's go back to the chat. Who else do we have? A Diva Fever, a new name. Hello to you. Hello to the Selfish Meme. And in fact, Christ called the woman a sinner, said Dan Allison. Yes, go and sin no more. I wonder, whether AOC came across that part. Mercurius Olycus says, what the hell is AOC huffing? Hello to Professor Paul, Kakva Pressure. Hello to William Hicks. There seems to be also quite enough of female teachers sexing up male students, says Anran. I wondered about that for the longest time, and then I think I figured it out. It's a childishness in these women. They don't want a man. They want a boy with certain physical attributes. And I suppose the assumption is that these boys are not going to make any demands on these teachers who are typically twice or three times as old as them, because they're going to be so grateful. Hello to Metal Mike, who says school sex ed curricula are designed for grooming. Joe Can 666 says, speaking of this, I saw what I assume was a woman today with long rainbow braids, like 4+ feet, tattoos, silver space boots, and rainbow clothes. Imagine your whole identity being your sexuality, says Chocokin 666. That is the whole point of the gay movement. It's not the same as homosexuality. Homosexuality is a practice, or it's behavior, whereas the gay identity is something different. The gay identity, that's you. That defines you in a way that nothing else can, which again, this is an idea which only arrived around 1960 and is revolutionary. That apparently, one can be a gay person without ever having had homosexual relations, which is quite remarkable. Hello to Emmett Kelly Zer, says hello, sir, in chat. Any comments on the Canadian government banning equipment made by China's Huawei and ZTE from being used in the nation's first generation 5G mobile network? I don't know. What do they say? That even a busted clock is right twice a day? That would be my reaction. Hello to David Wright. Professor Paul says, buy and review The Years of Great Silence 22. Yes, I will. How is pleasure a revolution when hedonism has been a sign of degeneration for all of human history, says respectable commenting name. Diva Fever says, you have informed, educated, and entertained me whilst I have listened to you during many hours of unpleasant work, Mr. Grace. I shall have to remunerate you via PayPal. Well, thank you so much. Entire Azov-style holdouts mass surrendered, says Chogokin 666. No. They didn't surrender. There was no surrender. It's just the Ukrainian army has ceased its operations in that sector, and the troops have been relocated or some such. William Sapphire described Nixon in terms of a three-layer cake. Did he mean that? Ask Emmett Kelly's Earth. Russian sappers and engineers will begin breaching the bunker systems tomorrow. Hail Russia, hail victory, says Jogan 666. Go figure, with all the past accusations of priests, it was the secular teachers we should worry more about. Look, if you read the John Jay report, or just any honest summaries of the John Jay report into the Catholic priesthood sex scandals, or you read Mary Eberstad. Well, I have like a 3-part series in the Weekly Standard on this, which I cannot recommend highly enough. This is homosexuals. This is homosexual men. It's their doing. They infiltrated the priesthood. They infiltrated the hierarchy. They took over the seminaries. And as Eberstad points out, to talk about this as being a pedophile scandal, it's not correct, because homosexual men are typically omnivores. They take the sex where they can get it. They have their preferences, but in the absence of that being available, they take whatever's on the menu. Who else do we have? Hello to Halper. In Anglophone Canada, they say maths, eh? That's not been my experience. The wicked flee where none follow, says John S. Yes, indeed. Professor Paul says today's kids hate history even more than they do math. I wonder why. I always loved history. Because Harry Truman said, the only thing new in life is the history you don't know. And I thought, I was really impressed when I first heard that. They used to have a history book club that was advertised on TV, and they would use this quotation. I thought, that is really profound. You know, it is really profound. I suppose it's the lack of what John Lukács called the lack of historical consciousness, that increasing it. And I've noticed this for several generations. I'll give you an example. When I was working at the UBC library, well, the Woodward Biomedical Library, in the early 1970s, early to mid 1970s, I was in charge of the books being sorted and put on the shelves for a whole floor, and it was a very large floor. That I'd hear a lot of students talking, and I'd hear a lot of things like this. Well, back in the 1950s, women weren't allowed to go to university. I thought, does this woman really believe that? And I would see the boy would say something like, I don't think that's true. And the woman would say, well, they were highly discouraged. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. And I just, this has gone on for several generations now, that person born in X year, well, if you look at year X minus 20, at that time, before then, it was castles and mist and mud and magic. Can you imagine a world without smartphones? Yeah, I know, pretty scary, right? Who else do we have here? Electing a new people is a project of the nomenclatura, says Mercurius Olicus. Hello to Pete Bauman. Professor Paul says the golem will eat its creator. Have you ever done or thinking of doing a book review of Camp of the Saints? I did so on Luke Ford's when I was on Luke Ford's show 3 or 4 years ago. It is suicidal for the scorpion to sting the frog because it does it anyway. Why? Because it is its nature. That's what we learn from that tale. Hello to No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania. Susanna Berlinski, hello. In 2006, Lake County Sheriff Chris Daniels was killed after being ejected and run over by his demolition derby school bus, and then run over by a bus driven by Seminole County Sheriff Don Esslinger. Okay, hello to Pro Commander, man. That's a new name to me. It is only anecdotal, but a number of the female teachers sexing up male students are in their 20s, says Anran. I have been consistently surprised looking at, typically mugshots are not flattering, especially for women. And I look at the pictures of these women, these school teachers arrested, and I'm thinking, you're a good-looking woman in your 20s. You have to go to 13 or 14-year-old boy. But again, they don't want adult men because they're childish. KMG, what do you think of the Limey with Terrence Stamp? I saw it when it came out, which was, I've only seen it once. It was a long time ago. I suppose I will have to see it again. There's this, what's it called? Car Safe? I'm sure you've heard of it in America. They do an awful lot of advertising on TV. It's insurance. It's not, accident, collision insurance or whatever. It's insurance to deal with, mechanical computer breakdowns of like your car. They have so many commercials on. It's almost like a Geico or Liberty Mutual, that they actually have segregated commercials. They've got iced tea for black people, and they've got Chris Berman for white people. And then they have another ad where there's some blonde woman, laying down the law that your car is going to break down. Well, it is, and it's very expensive to fix now, which it is. And she quotes Thomas Paine, seriously. And the quotation is up on the screen, attributed to Thomas Paine. If you are afraid to offend, you cannot be honest. And I thought, that's a pretty spicy thing to be saying on American TV these days. John S. says, laughable that they whine about needing to perform the literal default setting for any female mammal. I know that there are some women, there used to be an organization called the La Leche League. Maybe there still is. There's some women who take a very dim view of other women bottle feeding instead of breastfeeding. I can't say that I don't really think that this is, a particularly controversial thing to do. Tarot Destroyer says, in the 19th century, two women living together independent of financial support from a man was referred to as a Boston marriage. Indeed. Indeed, it was. Hello to David the Gnome. Hello to Hauper. Tubi. I'm not familiar with Tubi. David Rice says, I may watch Master and Commander of the World tonight. Many strong female characters. That was my point, Kevin, says Anne Run. Okay. Still saving DVDs to protect against wokeism. Is Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel worth watching? I have yet to see it. I'm one of those. I'll get back to the show in a minute. I'll just say this. If I hear about a movie and it's some, a director that I follow, say, or it's got good reviews from the type of people that I trust, not that there are all that many. Here's a sad truth about movie reviewers. Almost every movie they say is bad is in fact bad. Most of the movies they say are good are bad too. So I want us to be careful. But rather than spend, $10, $15 or whatever to watch a movie in a theater, I just prefer to buy the Blu-ray. I mean, Blu-rays, after a year or so, they go down significantly in price. Tarot Destroyer quotes Yukio Mishima, the most appropriate type of daily life for me was a day-to-day world destruction. Peace was the most difficult and abnormal state to live in. Paul Schrader's film, Mishima, is just, it's magnificent. Magnificent. Such a beautiful movie and so thought-provoking. Anyway, let's get back to it here. Yes. The neocons must be destroyed. This is from Poppy Coburn at Contra. I'm not sure that I was familiar with this woman. She's an English woman. Quite attractive, actually. Against neocons, old and new. This is a guest post by Poppy Coburn, a London-based writer and journalist. How I hate that phrase, London-based. Why don't you say she's from London or call her a Londoner? Ideological refugees have always been welcomed with open arms, particularly if they arrive laden with exotic gifts from the motherland. The intellectual dark web, infamously profiled by journalist Barry Weiss in the New York Times, is the most recent example of small L liberals migrating into conservative camps after complaining about the left's excesses. But these refugees come with baggage. It would be overly simplistic to separate conservatism in our time so neatly between natives and newcomers, but there are pertinent lessons to be learned from interactions between the two and the ways in which ideological leeches attempt to attach themselves to movements. The history of neoconservatism's rise on the right is instructive. Neoconservatism emerged in the late 1960s, mostly in the urban Northwest and largely composed of ex-Trotskyites and disaffected liberal intellectuals who allied themselves with conservatives. Christian Alejandro Gonzalez describes the alliance thusly. The move to the right among progressive intellectuals opened up some ground for an alliance with elements on the traditional center-right. The neoconservatives and the establishment conservatives of such magazines as National Review did not agree on everything, at least in the 1960s and 70s, but they agreed on much: the basic virtue of capitalism, the necessity of order, and the norms of civility, and above all, the pathological nature of the radical left, unquote. There are clear parallels between neoconservatives and the IDW. But while neoconservatives at least had an ideology, it seems the only discernible basis of unity in the IDW is opposition to incivility. This aversion increasingly applies to their new populist conservative allies. For example, Douglas Murray, who holds the dubious honor of both being a neoconservative and an IDW stalwart, recently attempted to start a smear campaign against a right-wing populist on bogus charges of anti-Semitism. The IDW demands that the vulgar impulses of the electorate proles be moderated. It is unquestionable to them that conservatism needs a professional and elite class constituency. In practice, this means policing the riffraff, a favorite pastime of key IDW figures like Claire Lehman. The founders of Quillette magazine, she makes it a point to denounce the wingnuts of the right whenever given the opportunity. Wingnuts of the right, I suppose, in Australian. I don't know. Claire Lehman, again, she's quite a good-looking woman, so I suppose I gave her more credence than she deserved, but she's made herself ridiculous. Well, at least to me. The success of the populist anti-groomer campaign and general disregard towards civil codes of conduct have only intensified the discomfort of the IDW with its new allies. Yes. Oh, don't use that word, groomers. Have you heard what's going on in schools? Yeah. This doesn't outrage you? You don't want people to be punished for this? Well, I don't know, but let's not be incivil. But if the IDW is able to perform a gatekeeping function, it is because such sentiments are deeply rooted in the conservative establishment. Conservative elites have historically seen their role to be that of a moral arbiter, restraining the worst excesses of the popular masses. Post-war conservatism attempted to straddle the gap between harnessing the anti-liberal energy of the people and moderating any genuinely populist sentiment from spiraling out of control. The founder of the National Review, William F. Buckley, would embody this spirit, flirting with populism when it suited him, while savagely punching right against the supposed kooks who he wished to see purged from the Republican Party. Like the IDW, neoconservative newcomers were able to attack opponents to the right precisely because they had the support of the conservative establishment. As far as the new right goes, and National Review magazine in particular, it was a strange movement in many ways, one of which being that it was in no way, it didn't look like America. Now, William F. Buckley, seemed awfully patrician to most Americans, but of course he was not. His father was an oilman. The new right, if you will, was dominated, heavily dominated, not by WASPs, but by Catholics like Buckley and Jews like Frank Meyer and others. As I say, didn't look like America. It was very much a group of outsiders. But back to Poppy. In the era of social media and the post-Trump awakening, read George Nash's book about this. He's very, very good on the origins of the new right. However, the role of the gatekeeper has become increasingly obsolete. Electorally successful right-wing movements no longer feel obliged to kowtow to the former staff of the Weekly Standard, a neoconservatism flagship that became defunct in 2018. Matthew Continetti, the son-in-law of arch-neocon Bill Kristol, a devotee of Paul Ryan, and once a writer for the Standard, summed up the disgust and helplessness many credentialed conservatives felt at the ugly face of populism. The spectacle made me ill, he wrote, upon watching a 2016 primary debate featuring future President Donald Trump. On screen, I watched decades of work by conservative institutions, activists, and elected officials being lit aflame, not only by the New York demagogue, but by his enablers, who waited until the last possible moment to criticize and try to stop him. Bill Kristol, of course, is the son of Irving Kristol, who wrote 2 books with neoconservatives in the title before we were informed that the use of the word neoconservatism was, wait for it, anti-Semitic. Irving Kristol, godfather of neoconservatism, was a very clever man and a steady man as well, a wise man. And you look at Bill Kristol and you're looking at regression to the mean. But as the Never Trump faction wept, a new group revealed itself, a new generation of ideological refugees organized predominantly online through social media sites like YouTube, would exploit popular discontent with the excesses of the resistance. The IDW wore its liberal credentials upon its sleeve. Even the most conservative-leaning voices of the movement prided themselves on the reluctance to engage in petty partisan squabbles. Positioning themselves as outside of the fight, these erstwhile intellectuals felt comfortable taking pot shots from the sidelines. That's not really what erstwhile means, but it's not just attitude and tone over which the IDW and populists split. It is at heart a debate over morality and the role that it should play in politics. In Politics as a Vocation, originally presented as part of a lecture series given in Munich, Weber lays out the various functions of the German state, both as it existed then and what he believed it could become. The work became a classic of political science, less so for Weber's impassioned cry for German liberalism than for his fascinating melding of two seemingly contradictory requirements for a political actor: the ethic of conviction and the ethic of responsibility. Without passion, politics is merely, quote, a frivolous intellectual game, unquote, but without proportion, the politician is condemned to, quote, political impotence, unquote. Such impotence is integral to understanding the IDW. All politics are embedded in morality. When we attempt to define the limits of the state, what our rights are, what kind of economic system we should put in place, all of these are primarily moral considerations. The IDW draws upon a principle encapsulated by John Rawls in his work A Theory of Justice. Moral neutrality is the definition of the good. But such a principle means nothing in practice, for political neutrality is nothing more than a widely cherished fiction. You can tout your commitment to personal liberties all you wish, but you can't be surprised when people believe you to be operating in bad faith when you justify the state placing people in camps for a good cause. Being anti-woke is not a meaningful political stance if you simultaneously defend the abuses of the state and are unwilling to fight back against your supposed enemies. Again, Lehman is illustrative. She has ridiculed critics of Australia's COVID-19 policies, which have included shooting anti-lockdown protesters with rubber bullets and putting people in so-called quarantine compounds, i.e. concentration camps, arresting those who attempt to flee. She has also denounced the Libs of TikTok Twitter account, which exposes people who prey upon children with radical ideas of sex and gender. Often these are teachers who brag about introducing kids to inappropriate things behind parents' backs. Libs of TikTok provides the masses directly with the image of the political enemy. No commentary is necessary beyond their own words, and that upsets laymen. Honestly, don't think you can complain about cancel culture while sharing clips from Libs of TikTok and clamoring for the individuals it features to get fired, she tweeted. Laymen, of course, views Libs of TikTok as a crass intellectual inferior, but the time for mealy-mouthed intellectualism is over. The new movement rejects it in a phrase: just call them groomers. Thus, just as neoconservatives like Continetti found themselves cast out, often due to their own paroxysms, the IDW has revealed itself as obsolete. Why entertain staid civility discourse from the New Republic when you can simply retort with the latest scoop by anti-woke journalist Christopher Rufo, exposing what progressives plan to do in their own words? There are signs that the post-Trump conservative movement is achieving a working synthesis of populist policy with solid intellectual backing. New experiments like Compact Magazine and even Thiel-backed Culture Wars suggest that the populist right will have far more coherent base to build upon than the frantic scrambling in the immediate aftermath of Trump's election. Even mainstream conservative figures like Charlie Kirk are increasingly comfortable flirting with genuine right-wing radicalism and populism. And this is, yes, I've noticed this in Charlie Kirk. I thought, he was too far gone, and our author concludes, fortunately, the populist faction has the momentum and the power now. The time is ripe to shut out these foreign interlopers for good, or at least demand their total assimilation if they insist on tagging along. This is from Poppy Coburn at the Contra Substack. All of this railing against Donald Trump 2015 and 2016, oh, his sordid personal life. How about Newt Gingrich and his sordid personal life? Oh, how about great American Bob Dole? Yeah, he married the nurse, who kept him together after he returned grievously wounded from World War II, and then she got a little old and he dumped her, or all the tribunes, of civility, of family values, who turned out to be, homosexuals, and the like. This is not, Donald Trump was not running for the president of the United States. He was not running to be Pontifex Maximus. He was running to be president of the United States. And of course, oh yeah, let's not mention Bill Clinton here. No, let's not. No, we don't want they do it. Yeah. Well, if Washington is Hollywood for ugly people, this gives you an idea of so many of the people who are drawn to Washington, complimenting the young staff assistant. Oh, you did such an excellent job on that paper. Oh, Senator, it wasn't just me. Oh, I know it was you. You can see where that's going, right? Well, there's misinformation being spread about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And you know who's responsible? It's Russia. Of course it's Russia. Russia is the font of all evil in the world. This is from David Klepper at the Associated Press. This is like Novosti. It's like the official news agency of Soviet America. Twitter is stepping up its fight against misinformation with a new policy cracking down on posts that spread potentially dangerous false stories. The change is part of a broader effort to promote accurate information during times of conflict or crisis. Starting Thursday, the platform will no longer automatically recommend or emphasize posts that make misleading claims about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, including material that mischaracterizes conditions in conflict zones or makes false allegations of war crimes or atrocities against civilians. Under its new crisis misinformation policy, Twitter will also add warning labels to debunked claims about ongoing humanitarian crises, the San Francisco-based company, or you could just call it the San Francisco company said. Users won't be able to like, forward, or respond to posts that violate the new rules. The changes make Twitter the latest social platform to grapple with the misinformation, propaganda, and rumors that have proliferated since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. That misinformation ranges from rumors spread by well-intentioned users to Kremlin propaganda amplified by Russian diplomats or fake accounts or networks linked to Russian intelligence. Oh, like the ghost of Kiev. Was that the Kremlin behind that? The heroic defenders of Snake Island. Was it the Kremlin that was behind that? How about all of the myths spread about Mariupol, including the fact that the New York Times, the BBC, the Los Angeles Times, and all the rest? No, there's no Ukrainian surrender in Mariupol. They're not even trying anymore. I would prefer it if they said, we have a rule here, you're not allowed to criticize the Ukraine. Okay? Honest. Then, oh no, we are fighting against mis and disinformation. Whenever you hear people speak about that, they're lying. Now, I know a lot of people on the right have been accusing people like Nina Jankowicz of mis and disinformation, and they're right about that. But I think that the right's use of this tends to muddy the waters. Let's look at antiwar.com. Ukraine hopes $40 billion aid package means high-end weapons. Pentagon sets another $100 million Ukraine weapons package. Turkey says no to Sweden and Finland NATO bids. Finland says it won't host nuclear weapons or NATO bases. Italy's Draghi calls for peace talks, ceasefire in Ukraine. And moving along, let's go to see what's up on Moon of Alabama. First of all, let's see whether their Twitter account has been nuked yet. Because, you can't report the news about what's going on there, or you won't last long on Twitter. Russians break through. Okay. I'm glad to hear it, if true. Oh, yes, Ukraine sitrep. Russians, this is from moonofalabama.org. Breakthrough U.S. bolsterism. On May the 14th, I noted that the U.S. had asked Russia for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Austin initiated the call, and the U.S. is seeking a ceasefire in Ukraine. Yesterday, the top officers of the U.S. and Russia had a call, which again the U.S. side had initiated. Things must be bad in Ukraine for this to have happened. Indeed, if one trusts the daily clobber list, the Russian military defense puts out all positions of the Ukrainian army are under heavy artillery fire and is losing about 500 men per day. There are additional Russian effective strikes on training camps, weapon storage sites, and transport hubs all over the country. On top of that, the tactical situation at the Eastern Front line has changed after Russian forces broke through the heavily fortified front line. And, okay, here we go. A few days ago, the Russian army went forward along the H-32 road, broke through the line in the direction of Propasna, and took the town. It has since extended the bulge by taking several villages to the north, west, and south. This breakthrough gives the chance to roll up the Ukrainian fortifications along the front line through flank attacks or from behind. By cutting the supply lines of the Ukrainian troops to the north and south, envelopes can be created, which will eventually lead to cauldrons with no way out for the Ukrainian troops. This is especially dangerous for the several thousand soldiers north of the bulge, which currently defend the cities of Severodonetsk and Lyshansk in the northeastern part of the upper bubble. The Russian plan was to have another breakthrough from the north, pushing to Seversk, then to close the upper envelope. But after several failed attempts to cross the forest area and the Seversky Donets River, that breakthrough is still to happen. Russia is now likely to push fresh troops into the Propasna bulge to extend its reach into all directions. Reports of current action show that the heavy fighting and bombing on the front line continues, and that bombing also continues to affect traffic nodes. Other fronts in the Ukraine are currently relatively quiet with little direct fire. Still, daily Russian artillery attacks hit all Ukrainian front lines and will cost daily casualties. Some 2,000 Azov militia and Ukrainian army troops have left the catacombs of Azovstal and Mariupol. Another 1,000 may still be down there. The Russian army is filtering these prisoners. Members of Azov and other militia will be put to court. Ukrainian army soldiers will be prisoners of war. The gasoline and diesel scarcity in Ukraine is currently having severe impacts. Even the Ukrainian military is now rationing its fuel. Since about 6 weeks ago, Russia has systematically attacked refineries and fuel storage sites in Ukraine. It has also disabled railroad bridges along the lines that brought fuel from Moldova and Romania. At the same time, the Ukrainian government has held up price regulations for fuel. The consumer sale prices for diesel and gasoline were fixed. The cost of fuel brought in by private trucks from Poland exceeded the price gas station owners could ask for. In consequence, gas stations ran dry as their owners refrained from purchasing the new fuel. The expected prices are lower than what is currently asked for in Germany, and that is without trucking the fuel the 600 kilometers from Poland to Kyiv. The threat of sanctions also means that local wholesalers will have little incentives to actually deal in fuel. With the average wages in Ukraine being about $480 per month, the real fuel prices will soon become another economic shock. The Ukrainian government also continues its attacks on unions and labor laws. In total, the socioeconomic situation for Ukraine is catastrophic. The military situation is even worse. Mariupol has fallen, and Russian troops working there will soon be able to go elsewhere. The Propasna bulge is threatening to envelope the whole northern frontier, along with the core of the Ukrainian army. There is no more talk of the Ukrainian army winning, like in Kiev or Kharkov, where the Russian troops retreated in good order after finishing their task of holding Ukrainian forces in place. Again, there is a daily wrap-up of news from the invasion, which you can find at moonofalabama.org. And of course, this is a reference to a song by Bertolt Brecht, which was covered by The Doors. I suppose that's the most famous cover of that song. And let's go to, I'm going to check and see if this site is still up. I expected, it's gone. Yeah, that would be the Russian USA podcast that has been nuked by Twitter. No surprise there. We can't have different opinions on this. Actually, we can't have news. News is forbidden because it's not as if Zelensky and his claque in the West can simply meme a war victory. God knows they've tried. Let's see. Douglas Murray had written, I see they're trying to do a Joe Rogan on Elon Musk. Hope it's equally unsuccessful. When people like this survive these attempts, everyone gets stronger. That's from Douglas Murray. I am indeed out for blood, Elon Musk tweeted 4 hours ago. Yeah, why is he out for blood? Because there's an attempt to bring him down with a lurid claims of sexual abuse. Of course, Elon Musk gets his character destroyed, and this woman who makes the claims, she gets to be anonymous because of course. This bill promoted internet censorship and violations of the First Amendment. Representative Massey, a Republican, says the lone vote against the anti-Semitism bill. Democratic Representative Joyce Beatty blames white supremacy replacement theorists for Dallas salon shooting. Unfortunately, the suspect is black. Let's get back into Joseph Tainter's The Collapse of Complex Societies. Within the last 20 to 30 years, archaeological fieldwork has produced finds that require a major reassessment of the Maya. The University of Pennsylvania project at Tikal, the largest Mayan site, has produced evidence of a center that was urban in its proportions, with population numbering in the tens of thousands. Such population densities seem to exceed the support capabilities of a Swidden agriculture, leading to the suggestion that past Mayan agriculture may have been more intensive than that of today. Not surprisingly, both aerial and ground surveys in recent years have found substantial evidence for intensive agriculture in the form of terraces, canals, and raised fields. The Maya elite appear to have been interested in more than calendrics, as their inscriptions are showing evidence of concern with dynastic succession, political struggles, alliances, royal marriages, and the like. Evidence of warfare is found in both art and fortifications, evidence which Webster suggests has further reduced the peaceful Maya to the same level as the rest of contentious humanity. The new findings suggest that the Maya may not have been unusual among early civilizations and required a revised synthesis of the lowland classic. Mayan archaeologists have responded with such a synthesis. The emergence of Maya civilization apparently lies in the pre-classic, when many classic period characteristics began to develop. Early pre-classic villages existed as early as 2000 BC. Maize pollen has been found in the central Petun Lakes, dating to the same period. By the middle pre-classic, there were settlements containing at least 200 to 300 persons each. The middle and late pre-classic farmers of the southern lowlands were undeniably successful, for their archaeological record reveals a continuously rising population. Webster suggests that there was a population pressure in the Bekan region by about 500 BC, while Hammond concludes that by the late pre-classic, population density and site spacing were such that any further growth would have led to competition. Based on the research in the central Petun Lakes region, Devi et al. Calculated constant population growth rate through the pre-classic and classic periods of about 0.1% per year, which yields a doubling interval of about 408 years. At some point in the pre-classic, probably varying across the region, this continued population growth led inevitably to strains on existing food production systems. A variety of responses followed. Agricultural strategies had to change and did so through the formation of systems that were increasingly labor-intensive. R.E.W. Adams suggests that there may have been a conversion from Swidden to more intensive agricultural systems in the central and northern Petun by the late pre-classic or early pre-classic. There is good evidence for this. A major system of hydraulic engineering involving reservoirs and canals was constructed at the Belizean site of Cerros in the late pre-classic, with some parts of the system dated to between 250 BC. Let's see, Friedel and Scarborough suggest that this development represents commercial rather than subsistence production. A similar system was started at the site of Edzna in northern Yucatan in the late pre-classic. Calculations of population levels and subsistence production indicate that by the late pre-classic, subsistence stress in the central Petun may have required shorter fallow periods and the addition of less productive lands. In this region, an early lacustrine settlement pattern associated with reliable water sources and aquatic protein gave way to increased middle pre-classic settlement in the water-deficient interior. This early shift to more intensive agriculture may have been widespread, for by the late pre-classic, much of the central area had been deforested. Such a condition would make long fallow Sweden impossible. Pollen samples indicate that the pre-classic landscape was a mosaic with occasional hamlets. Human population density may have been around 25 to 60 per square kilometer. Major fortifications at the site of Bekan, a ditch and parapet surrounding the site, have been dated to between 100 and 300 AD. It seems likely, therefore, that the competition and conflict which characterized later Maya civilization began in the pre- or proto-classic. Its origin can probably be attributed to the pressure of population on resources. The late pre-classic Maya were faced then with population pressure, a strained resource base, an increasingly competitive environment. At least two solutions were sought: agricultural intensification, as noted, and increased socio-political complexity. The evidence for the latter is striking by the middle and late pre-classic. Formal public architecture and social differentiation become evident by early and the middle pre-classic and increasingly thereafter. Public buildings on platforms and status differentiation in burials occur by about 400 BC. The site of Altar de Sacrificios has yielded an interesting record of the emergence of local hierarchies. At the end of the Middle Pre-Classic, one of the several residential clusters was rebuilt so that it was notably larger than the rest, with the largest monument some 4 meters high. Successive rebuildings transformed this into a classic temple-palace complex with a 13-meter-high pyramid mound and a stone-faced stairway. This transformation seems to record the emergence of a ruling descent group from an earlier dominant residential unit. In the late pre-classic, a 2 or 3 level administrative hierarchy was present in the southern lowlands. Public architecture became truly monumental at some lowlands sites. Tikal was emerging as a center of considerable magnitude. These patterns intensified throughout the classic. Population, agricultural investment, socio-political complexity, architectural elaboration, and conflict continued to grow. In the early classic, regional political organization developed into increasingly formal and hierarchical patterns. Prior to 434 AD, centers were spaced about equidistantly and seem to have been roughly equivalent in rank. Tittle and Waxington, however, may have been early dominant centers, for they have the earliest dated monuments and together account for about 50% of all monuments between 292 and 434 AD. One prominent Mayanist, Gordon Willey, suggests that Tikal actually attained a measure of dominance over the entire southern lowlands during the early classic, possibly constituting the capital of a southern lowland state. The maximum areal extent for classic monuments and art styles was reached in the early 6th century AD. Major centers emerged that may have been regional capitals. There was a hierarchy of at least 4 levels of sites, with hexagonal lattices of secondary centers around regional capitals. The early Mayan writing can be dated to the 3rd century AD. Early texts deal with the birth, death, accession, and conquests of rulers. At Tikal, a defensive earthwork and moat were constructed at the site's north end, spanning the 9.5 kilometers between the 2 swamps that bounded Tikal to the east and west. A similar feature lies south of the site. An intriguing development at the end of early classic is a sharp decline in the number of monuments newly dedicated and in the number of sites at which these occur. There are indications of a decline in other construction as well as changes in ceramic and architectural styles. Dating between 534 and 593 AD, the event has been termed the hiatus. One of the interesting aspects of the episode is an apparent degree of political decentralization, as stelae, stone monuments that mark political events, were erected for the first time on the peripheries of the southern lowlands. The core area, in other words, no longer held a political monopoly. Although there is no evidence to indicate a marked reduction in socio-political complexity across the region, the hiatus seems in some way similar to the political decentralization that, as will be seen, marked the collapse. The late Classic witnessed the resurgence and culmination of the trends begun in the pre-Classic. Between 652 and 751 AD, there was a high degree of homogeneity across the southern lowlands in the style and iconography of monuments. A standardized and highly sophisticated lunar calendar was adopted throughout the region within a 10-year period. Major sites may have served as regional capitals engaging in alliances with each other. Integration within a region was accomplished by marriage alliances between regional capitals and their dependencies. Major centers were surrounded by secondary centers that were spaced almost equidistantly from each other. The stature of Tikal seems to have comparatively declined. Although it remained the largest state, it was forced to compete politically with many new centers. Investment in monumental architecture increased substantially over early times. Several aspects of the Classic period merit detailed discussion in order to understand the collapse. These include population, subsistence, sociopolitical complexity, and related phenomena, and warfare. And I will have more from Joseph Tainer's The Collapse of Complex Societies on Monday. But let's talk about Canada. This is from the American Sun by Hank Oslo. Poor Canada, a review of Ending Bigly, A. I should mention that I know, not personally, the fellow who wrote this book, who he calls himself Bill Marchand. The essay begins, Poor Canada, by accident of geography and population, has been doomed to be a resource extraction scheme masquerading as a country, with an essentially superfluous high IQ population under the misapprehension that they are free men possessed of traditional Anglo-Saxon liberties and not a temporarily elevated chattel of a latifundium. The thing about primary production industries like mining, petroleum, forestry, and agriculture is that they are politically salient forms of wealth with influence beyond their objective proportion of the economy. Add up the taxes, commissions, construction costs, and rents from every condo in Vancouver, and you will come up with a number approaching the entire provincial GDP of Saskatchewan. But the former is dispersed in a sea of tiny landlords and freeholders made accidentally wealthy as a temporary safe deposit box for embezzled Chinese assets. The value is high, but sellers are forced to be buyers, since everyone has to live somewhere, so their paper wealth is not terribly liquid, and there are a dearth of productive assets they can lever their holdings to. Certainly no paper property millionaire is in a position to be hiring someone's nephew as a favor. By contrast, a place like Saskatchewan is like a parody of some 1880s copper baron fantasy. Pulling fertilizer out of the ground is the incredibly profitable domain of a Death Star-sized corporation and a few of their friends, which historically ran the joint with a fuzzy distinction between the corporate end and the local government. If fertilizer isn't to your taste, perhaps a uranium mine or a timber operation. Now there is an asset you can get liquidity out of. Your condo might lose value, i.e. the market might decide they'd rather live somewhere else, all things considered. Buyers might not be able to get financing since most property purchases are debt financed and basically consumptive, or not enough if interest rates rise or the local economy hits the rocks. But pretty much everyone likes to eat, so your wheat field and your fertilizer operation will always be a valuable asset with a relatively low cost of capital whose operation can be scaled until you can afford a few hooked up foremen. The ideal society for the people who really run Canada has a few fantastically wealthy owners on the top, trusted managers in the middle, and just enough warm bodies on the bottom to keep the trucks running. But being colonized wholesale by genuinely impressive people, plus Quebec, rather than a few caudillos ruling over a vast pre-existing peasant population, meant that it wasn't going to be a stable, purely extractive society. A man carves a homestead out of endless maples, or starts a factory stamping auto parts, or invents the Timbit. He starts thinking as a citizen rather than a mere subject. You have to keep such a man distracted thinking about problems that don't matter and he can't fix, and ideally, a new one each week. You need a face for this, a theater kid. Unfortunately, one was procured in the despicable Justin Trudeau. And ending bigly, explores Trudeau, of course, but who is Trudeau? A hired gun of no fixed principles beyond putting on a show for the rubes so that their pockets can be picked. A man who breathlessly weeps over human rights abuses while cashing checks from the Chinese government in preparation for demanding his own population be subjected to forced injections, replaced by more compliant foreigners where possible, and reduced to slavery if they object. Shut up and haul the timber, he explains. We're all in this together, or something. Trudeau is a man with no past, no established parentage on account of his mother's Caribbean dalliances, nor any particular project inspiring him to pursue office. He has no future. No Trudeauism will exist. No monuments will be erected. Just an endless stream of managerial initiatives he happened to be present to sign for. A receptionist for the global rules-based order. But he will have an end. Will it be in fire or in ice, a ballot, a bullet, a peaceful retirement, a midnight flight to asylum? The stories in Ending Bigly, are entertaining because in their breath they suggest to us that no one knows how this will shake out. And, oh yes, let's talk about Jagmeet Singh. Now, some of you may object I'm making fun of this man unnecessarily because his name is Jagmeet Singh. Well, this is another incompetent transliteration because it's pronounced Jugmeat. Jugmeat says there will be consequences for people not willing to get vaccinated. Oh, really? And what majority want to make their medical status public information? And for a failed product, we need to tell Trudeau's puppet where to go. This is something that he said a couple of months ago, or a few months ago, which is resurfaced, seeing he is, in a coalition. He's formed a coalition government with Justin Trudeau's Liberals, even though the NDP doesn't get any cabinet ministers. You want to know more about Jugmeat? This is from how would I put it, an obsequious profile of him in Toronto Life magazine. Jugmeat has a taste for dandy luxuries that don't comport with the monkish minimalism of his party. He wears bespoke suits in the slim British style. His favorite is a brown tweed with cobalt blue stripes designed by a tailor in New Delhi, which he often pairs with a millennial pink turban. He owns two Rolex watches, an Oyster Perpetual Datejust, and a Submariner. Both were gifts. A crimson BMW coupe and 6 designer bicycles. I have just an absurd number of bikes, he says, more than one person should have. His kirpan, the ceremonial Sikh dagger he wears under his jacket, is a steel design by a metalworker outside Boston. Since joining Queen's Park in 2011, Singh has become one of the city's most devoted partygoers, a regular at King West night spots and gala fundraisers at fashion shows and Raptors games. Yes, the kirpan. That's one of the signs. All Sikhs, this gets complicated because we were told at the time that the Royal Canadian Legion and the RCMP was forced to accept Sikh men wearing turbans that you can't be a Sikh without the turban and the hair, which is uncut, and the kirpan and the rest of it. Then we were told, well, yeah, there are people who don't do that who are perfectly good Sikhs as well. In other words, Canadians were sold a bill of goods. This is all preposterous. Sikhism evolved as a protest against, let's say, 15th to 16th century, as a protest against what was seen as Hindu lassitude in fighting off the Mughal or Muslim invasion. So Sikhism is a kind of, as much as a religion, it's more of a paramilitary cult than an actual religion. Now, in the absence of the Mughal invasion ended with the British Empire. So the idea that halfway across the world, in British Columbia, where Jagmeet Singh lives, which has more Sikhs than any other province in Canada, what sense does Sikhism make? Because there's no Muslim invasion to stop. Why is it permitted that people like him are allowed to wear these daggers even in courtrooms and public buildings? It's all completely absurd. And never mind the fact that the reason that Jagmeet Singh is never going to become opposition leader, let alone prime minister, is that he looks like a cartoon villain. Oh, yes, it was his parents who were the first Canadians in his family. And of course, Jagmeet has given his child a Punjabi name, which means unstoppable or some such thing. Very Canadian, and he lets us know on a regular basis how much he hates this country. But that's what Canada has become. Paul Joseph Watson of Summit News. The World Health Organization is warning that summer festivals and mass gatherings could accelerate the spread of monkeypox. The first indication that health technocrats may once again attempt to impose restrictions in the name of stopping the spread of a virus. Monkeypox cases in the UK, where the virus first arrived thanks to someone traveling back from Nigeria, have more than doubled, it was revealed earlier today. According to Sky News, exactly what is driving the UK's latest outbreak is a mystery. I thought homosexuality, male homosexuality. It's true. It's true. Hans Kluge, regional director for Europe, says, as we enter the summer season in the European region with mass gatherings, festivals, and parties, I'm concerned that transmission could accelerate as the cases currently being detected are among those engaging in sexual activity, and the symptoms are unfamiliar to many. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to talk about bushmeat. And, we've gotten to the point now where follow the science. Well, where's the data? Why are you keeping data from us? Even, simple personal data, huh? This is from the Canadian Press. 2 of Ontario's 4 major party leaders hit with COVID-19 just ahead of an election. NDP leader Andrea Horwath and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner have both tested positive. So I searched this story, and all the stories on these infections tell us about their vaccination status. They're not going to. They're not going to. Because I am certain that both of them have 2 vaccinations, that almost certainly they've had 3 vaccinations, and there's a pretty good chance they have had more than 3. But they got infected anyway. And that, people, is called negative efficacy. So I'm going to take a look at Steve Kirsch's newsletter. And he writes, I was exonerated in a peer-reviewed medical journal along with my fellow so-called misinformation spreaders. This is from the National Library of Medicine, the National Center for Biotechnology Information, a paper called What is the Truth by Russell L. Blaylock. Kirsch comments, woohoo, we've been exonerated, an article published in a peer-reviewed medical journal that talks about all the medical mischief that's been going on. Finally. And this subhead is priceless. Why did Fauci want no autopsies of those who died after vaccination? Can you guess, perhaps? I don't think it's that hard to figure out. And let's go to, nope, we already talked about that yesterday. And let's go to dailyskeptic.org. And start with a news roundup. And keep in mind that this is a British website. And Monkeypox cases linked to sexual contact and alphabet people networks. Maybe it'll become the new AIDS. You know that AIDS used to be called GRIDS? That was the name that doctors first gave it, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome. But that turned out to be truthful, so it had to be changed. In bombshell editorial, New York Times questions U.S. strategy in the Ukraine. Government's worried about COVID misinformation, so start with their own lies and distortions, says U.S. State Attorney General. That would be the Attorney General of Indiana. Western hawks ignore risk of nuclear war. Wow. The bloom has really gone off that rose. How long before we start hearing criticism of Zelensky? Yeah, like what's with that getup? Why is he dressed in camo clothing all the time? He's not a soldier. And boy, that guy sure is thirsty. How long do you think before we're going to start hearing this from, trusted sources? mRNA vaccines significantly associated with deadly blood clots, major study finds. This is from a major study in the leading medical journal Vaccines. The research team analyzed 1,154,023 adverse event reports from more than 130 countries. The authors note that many reports were in younger people and conditions were serious. CVTs were commonly reported in patients aged 18 to 44 and 45 to 64 years, more frequently in women and mainly in Europe and America. More than 90% of the patients were in serious condition and 33% did not recover or died. And it appears that Boris Johnson has survived Partygate. I don't know what that guy would have to do in order to be ousted. But the only thing that's really enraging about Partygate is that they were partying while they were telling other people you can't do that, and oh yeah, we'll arrest you or heavily fine you. Yeah, that's what was enraging about it. And let's take a look at the statistician to the stars, William M. Briggs. Oh, he has on a podcast. Oh, yeah. This is funny. The RAND organization or company or whatever they're called and the Army show how the science is done in trying to prove women the equal of men. Yeah, they're going to catch up. They're going to catch up. Well, no. Enter RAND Corporation, an old-timey research company that in golden days looked for causes of observations. Now, following modern science, they research theory. One theory the Army asked them to research was the physical equality of men and women. By equality, I mean the equalness of men and women's athletic ability and stamina. In the old days, the absolutely irrefragable truth of inequality between the sexes was known to all, as were its causes. This truth, once endorsed by research, has been negated by theory. It is now forbidden to speak. Theory demands equality, so RAND set about finding it, which is always possible, believe it or not, especially when you get to define just what equality means. A perfectly legitimate exercise, too, because science is in the business of measurement, and to measure, one first has to define. So now there's no point in carping about this, insisting that all such research is useless because none of it can possibly change the truth. Well, that is just your opinion, and you are not an expert. So your opinion is of no value. Only certified experts can weigh in because that is the way of science. RAND tried various things, none of which worked. Finally, they followed the Army's lead and recommended sex norming tests of ability. This, when math is applied to measurements, transforming those measurements so that differences disappear. If men can lift 200 pounds and women 50, scientifically multiply the 50 by 4, where I'll do the math for you, it becomes a sex normalized 200, the asterisk indicating the norming. The asterisk is soon forgotten and equality is declared. The idiocy of this, well, it might be noticed, is never acknowledged. To do so would break the spell of theory. If you doubt, marvel at the blizzard of numbers and the avalanche of words, most of them large, technical, and science-y, in RAND's 92-page report. Discover for yourself if the report throws up its hands and admits men and women are unequal or if it embraces theory. Start with the sly propaganda of the cover photo. And let's talk about Jim Cussler's column this morning, which is about theory as well. Theories exist to be proven. Time, they say, is nature's way of making sure that everything doesn't happen at once. Then why does everything seem to be happening at once? These must be unnaturally strange times. Here comes Ukraine. There goes Ukraine. Our money is worthless. No water for Las Vegas. Bye-bye Roe v. Wade. Financial markets wobbling. Vaccine injuries everywhere. Diesel prices killing truckers. Food shortages. UFOs. World War III. White supremacists. No baby formula. Woo. Duck and cover. Here comes monkeypox. So it goes with criticality in hyper-complex systems. You see the unity of the show? You see? The passing of thresholds into breakdown, all at the same time. Failures mutually ramifying, other failures seemingly unconnected, and weird things popping up in the dust and rubble like monsters in a bad dream. I know it's disconcerting to see the world fly apart. Forgive me then, while you fret about the future of your loved ones and your retirement account, if I focus in on just one thing for the moment. The doings of federal attorney John Durham, the special counsel looking into matters pertaining to Russiagate, the first step in America's attempted suicide. Durham is currently prosecuting a small fish, a sardine among the lawfare sharks and killer whales of Gay Street, Michael Sussman, for telling one measly lie to the FBI. Durham has been at this task for 2 years plus. That's a long time to spend on a simple crime based on a few easy-to-get bits of evidence, a cell phone text, some emails, the testimony of one principal witness, and a pretext that no one ever took seriously in the first place, the punk-ass Alpha Bank conduit to Russia story. So in 2016, schlubby lawyer Michael Sussman from Perkins Coie, the D.C. law firm representing the Hillary Clinton campaign, asks for a meeting with his own old Department of Justice colleague Jim Baker, now general counsel or top lawyer for the FBI. He has some sensitive information that the Bureau might find interesting. He says he does not represent any particular client in the matter. He's just stepping forward as a patriotic citizen. He emphasizes this point more than once, including a text recorded in the digital cloud, the night before the meeting. He comes in out of the swampy Potomac heat to Baker's air-conditioned lair at 935 Pennsylvania Avenue and spins a tale about a Russian-owned outfit called Alpha Bank, with computer servers located in the vicinity of Trump Tower in New York City, which, he alleges, are being used by candidate Donald Trump to communicate with bad guys in Russia. The story goes nowhere fast. The FBI discounts it. Turns out the Sussman billed the hours spent on this folderol to Hillary for America, which prima facie indicates he was working for her campaign at the time. 6 years later, he's indicted. Anyway, perhaps unbeknownst to Sussman, the FBI in July 2016 had already ramped up an investigation into the Trump campaign with the sexy name Crossfire Hurricane, a lyric bit from the ancient Rolling Stones hit Jumpin' Jack Flash. So anointed by FBI sexy super agent Peter Strzok, who was at the time jumping in and out of bed with colleague Lisa Page, legal counsel to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Crossfire Hurricane was predicated, depending on who you believe, and has yet to be actually determined, on various cockamamie stories featuring sketchy characters such as so-called Maltese professor, that is, CIA informant and operator Joseph Mifsud, Australian diplomat and international man of mystery Alexander Downer, Cambridge visiting professor, you mean DOD errand boy, Stephen Halper, and quite a few other slippery players, all revolving around the previous FBI investigation midterm exam, into emails supposedly stolen off of Hillary Clinton's unauthorized private server located at her home at Chappaqua, New York. The case had been summarily dropped by FBI Director James Comey, who incidentally had no authority to decide whether the matter ought to be prosecuted or not. That was up to Attorney General Loretta Lynch, an old crony of Hillary Clinton's. But this began the FBI and DOJ coup, or witch hunt, that ran several years, involved scores of active participants, and climaxed in the malicious and fruitless escapades of the Mueller investigation. All of which brings us back to Schlubby Sussman, the sardine among sharks and whales, and to my theory of the case. Special counsel Durham was appointed by Attorney General William Barr to determine the origins of the giant hairball called Russiagate. As you can see, the Sussman matter amounts to an almost insignificant little thread of the greater scandal. Did Durham spend 2+ years on it to the exclusion of a stupendous mass of seditious lying, deception, and roguery by scores of government officials? I don't think so, Jim Kunstler declares. Now Durham has brought the case into the D.C. Federal District Courtroom of Judge Christopher Cooper, appointed by Barack Obama. Judge Cooper's wife, Amy Jeffress, is the attorney for the same Lisa Page of Jumpin' Jack Flash fame. Meanwhile, several jurors seated in the trial revealed that they were donors to the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign, something one might expect in a city that voted over 90% for Mrs. Clinton in that election. Durham must have known that prosecuting the case under those circumstances would be a slog. And Kunstler concludes, win or lose on Sussman, I think that Durham is using the case to test certain evidentiary parameters. I think he will turn around in the weeks ahead, perhaps during the summer, and bring indictments against many higher-up figures in the DOJ, FBI, and elsewhere in government on much graver charges, bundled into a RICO for the simple reason that Russiagate was obviously a seditious conspiracy. Therefore, this is a conspiracy theory. Theories exist to be proven. Federal cases are brought to furnish proof. If I'm wrong about this, then the long Durham investigation has been a joke. Personally, I don't think Durham intends to go down in history as a joker. Oh, yes, Trump's insurrection. He facilitated, or something like that, an insurrection. I'll say it again. It's a funny kind of insurrection where the titular, or putative, rather, insurrectionists don't bring weapons. I guess they didn't take Insurrection 101. Let's go back to the chat. And here we go. And let's go to the bottom, scroll up. Not holding breath that any justice will be delivered, says Don Willis, who previously said, gosh, what terrible, evil people. Hopper says, guess Operation Toothless Bearded Hag would hit too close to home. Yes, nice Jumpin' Jack Flash reference. Yeah, I once lived in a house where there was a budding guitarist. This isn't Jumpin' Jack Flash, it's just Brown Sugar, which, as we all know now, you're supposed to play with 5 strings on your Telecaster instead of 6. So you're all doing it wrong, apparently, and you have to use drop D tuning. But anyway, this very nice fellow who lived in the house named Bruce, he just practiced that riff over and over and over again, such that I wanted to strangle him. Rose Law Firm, Dark People, says Don Willis. See the unity of the show, yes. MP Boils are the new spike protein. Ball of Death, says Hauper. Have I missed Tainter's bit? Asked me to. Yes, sadly, you did. Monkeypox Lockdown would be a good name for a band. Now, there was a band. I suppose you could call them an electronica band from a few years ago. I thought they were quite good, actually. They were called Simian Mobile Disco. It's true. It's true. Susanna Berlinski says there was a time when being a lesbian was good. Lesbian equals a citizen of Lesbos, the Greek island. STD equals Doctor of Sacred Theology. Che Blutarsky said Zelensky will keep getting Ukrainians killed as long as he's getting paid off to do so. The Selfish Meme says people should stop hanging out in monkey houses if they don't want monkey pox. I hate autocorrect, says Chogakin666. I hardly spend any time on devices that use autocorrect, so it's not a problem with me. Russia is invading Victoria until they finish up this Ukraine business, says Anrun. Susanna Berlinski quotes Frederick Douglass, the life of a nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. Was KMG's hotel just now strafed by a fighter jet? That's what it sounds like, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Dr. David E. Martin, quoted by Susanna Berlinski, the Moderna and Pfizer alleged vaccine trials have explicitly acknowledged that their gene therapy technology has no impact on viral infection or transmission whatsoever. Okay. Kelly Ali did nothing wrong, says Don Willis. Yeah, I'm quite fond of her as a singer. I hadn't heard her solo stuff, just the album and some B-sides she made, some movie soundtrack stuff for Sneaker Pimps. And they fired her. You had this exotic singer with this, warm, sultry voice, and they kicked her out. Didn't that happen with that band In Excess? The Michael Hutchins got all the attention, and the people who wrote the songs. Look, we wrote the songs, I think the same thing with Sneaker Pimps. She doesn't write the songs. She just sings them. Well, other people would be, pleased, so that, you don't have to be interviewed every time. You don't have to be the face of the band. I heard they getting back together, or got back together, since the 90s are hot now. Okay. Davos, we've been told by Michelle Rempel Garner and others, it's just a talking shop. I mean, nothing happens there. The World Economic Forum has no power, and anyone who says that a power influence, and anyone who says otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. Well, Klaus Schwab managed to get all these prime ministers, seemingly every prime minister or chancellor in Europe, to go to Davos. But I will end with this. This is from the Schwab Substack. Theater Kid Occupied Government. And here is a couple of pictures of Nina Jankowicz leading with her chin. Yes, the pun intended. Something quite disturbing is happening on the world stage. A truly grotesque spectacle is unveiling itself. One by one, all of the world actors are being replaced with literal actors and jesters. The line between the fictive and factual is vanishing. The stage is an ontological abyss, creeping towards the audience in this theater of cruelty, wherein the spectator becomes an unwilling participant in his own theatrical experience. And here he quotes from the creator of the theater of cruelty, Antonin Artaud. The spectacle will be extended by elimination of the stage to the entire hall of the theater and will scale the walls from the ground up on light catwalks, will physically envelop the spectator and immerse him in a constant bath of light, images, movements, and noises, unquote. Many have asked, is Biden's new disinformation Tsarina qualified? Few have queried, is she even human? This is the question we will endeavor to answer. Most public-facing surfaces of academia will readily allow that all theater is political, but they will rarely cross the etiology and say that all politics is theatrical, even though the concept of a politically constructed reality has been prosecuted in the terms of a puppet theater since at least the time of Plato. It seems that to draw out any inferences is strictly forbidden, except in very specific terms. Machiavelli took it a step further, discussing in detail the theatrical and symbolic qualities of political violence. Debord treats spectacle as a fundamental organizing principle of modern society. It is a simple task for academics to examine the theatrical aspects of the Third Reich or delve into the political performances of terrorists, almost never mentioning state terrorism, of course. Baudrillard pushes beyond the order of sorcery, beyond the recognition of God. For him, there is no longer a man behind the curtain. We are in the cave beneath Plato's cave. Quote, the reality of simulation is unbearable, crueler than Artaud's theater of cruelty, which was still an attempt to create a dramaturgy of life, the last gasp of an ideality of the body of blood, of violence in a system that was already taking it away toward a reabsorption of all the stakes without a trace of blood. For us, the trick has been played. All dramaturgy and even all real writing of cruelty has disappeared. Simulation is the master. And we only have a right to the retro, to the phantom, parodic rehabilitation of all lost referentials. Everything still unfolds around us in the cold light of deterrence, including Artaud, who has the right, like everything else, to his revival, to a second existence as the referential of cruelty, unquote. Baudrillard, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with that name today. Baudrillard comes closest to prophesying our modern prodigios, the abominations that we call theater kids, as the signs that dissimulate that there is nothing. In the past, portents in the sky signaled the appearance of these changing images of man, unrecognized by God. Now the stars are obscured, comets are contained, and the signal that mutates comes from the screen. This is an excerpt from the Schwab Stack. It's a paid post, but he's given us a few hundred words, and doubtless, besides Nita Jankowicz, he would consider Justin Trudeau, who is the theater kid par excellence, hence all his dressing up, including many instances of blackface or what they call brown face and the turbans and all the rest of it. But of course, Vladimir Zelensky, and Trudeau has made a pilgrimage to see Zelensky. And note, it wasn't the other way round. As someone said, I wish I could remember this, perhaps someone could remind me, that Zelensky becoming the president of Ukraine is like, I don't know, someone like Warren Buffett deciding, given that, it was an oligarch who was responsible for all this. It was something like, Warren Buffett deciding in 2008 that Jon Stewart should become president of the United States. And see if there's anything new here. Don Willis is out of here. Sneaker pimps, bad decisions, says Don Willis. Brown sugar life hack, says Don Willis. Okay, that's it. Gonna wrap it up. Be back on the air Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, as always. I've been neglecting to ask people to subscribe, to punch the like button or whatever. I suppose I should do that. If you'd like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via Interact at kevingrace@shop.ca. And I leave you with this benediction in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine connection, human connection, in order to ease the burden. Good night.